Welcome back. Time now to get real. And tonight I want to focus on a pattern I've noticed emerging over this past year. It's the left wing's agenda and narrative, and how the Democrats, along with the help from their allies, the mainstream media, constantly change that narrative on you, the American people, to fit their leftist agenda. So let's first begin with earlier this year. Americans watched as other countries around the world shut down their economies as the virus spread. So our president took action. First, locking down travel to China, the source of the virus. He then encouraged governors in states that had large breakout numbers of the virus to take charge and begin a lockdown as they saw fit. But what was the narrative? Pushed out by the left. Do you remember? Trump's a racist. Trump's a xenophobe when he shut down China. Then, like a 1-2 punch, George Floyd died. And riots broke out across the nation. Thousands upon thousands, some peaceful, demonstrated in the streets, like Seattle, Portland, St. Louis, Chicago, Denver, LA, the list goes on and on. The left and the media immediately blaming the unrest and the national divide on the president. Really? Get real, man. If systemic racism truly exists at the extent they say it does in our country, since the civil rights movement back in the 60s, how is that our president's fault, who's only been in office less than 4 years? But nevertheless, that was the narrative the left ran with. Then those protests, thanks to the funding that was given to Antifa, and it is an organization, turned violent. Peaceful citizens were injured, even killed. Businesses and communities burned down, many of them black. While the media and the left all but ignored those stories, and if you recall, even called them peaceful protests. Remember? Even when they were standing in front of burning buildings. Then what happened next? As they attacked and attempted to destroy national monuments and federal courthouses, our president sent in a small number of federal officers in a couple key cities to clean up the mess. Why? Because Democrats who controlled those cities were too afraid to lift a finger. And what did the narrative then pivot to? Trump is a dictator. He illegally sent masked officers in to break up peaceful protests. Remember? Those protests dominated the narrative and the news cycle for months. All the while, the left and the media began then a new narrative. You must vote by mail because it's too dangerous to go out and vote. Remember? Oh, but it's okay to stand in line, elbows to a-holes at Walmart and touch the debit keypad everybody else touches, but not put your ballot box in the box, right? Then after months of silence from leaders on the left, namely Joe Biden, here comes Uncle Joey out of the basement, where he kind of condemns the violence and kind of says he doesn't believe in the defund the police movement. Then what happened? The loudest voices out there screaming defund police and let's riot and loot simply poof, went away the last couple of weeks. Why? Because they pulled their funding and they wanted people to hear what Joey had to say. Remember, this is an organization, Antifa. And the media, once again, silent on all of this. That's right, just building Joey from the block up and tearing down our president. Fast forward to a couple weeks ago. The pressure now on. We're just weeks away from the election. And the left and the media must continue their new narratives in an attempt to swing any undecided voters. So what happens next? We're told that voting by mail is safe and secure. And when stories begin to arise, there's evidence of voter fraud, like we just told you about earlier in the show, they dismiss it as nonsense and lies. They put it on our president and say he's making up a narrative. Then just last week, we learn through factual evidence that Joe Biden has connections to China, Russia, and Ukraine through his son that may compromise him as a national security risk if he becomes president. And what happens? Like a good lapdog, the mainstream media sits down and does the left's bidding by telling you there's no evidence, that it's all Russian propaganda. And then Mr. Biden goes into hiding this week for 4 days until the debate. Why? So he can avoid questions about that scandal. And the mainstream media is nowhere to be found. Why? Well, my fellow patriots, it's called a news cycle. They last about 3 to 4 days. And I'm betting that Joey and the rest of his followers are hoping the story will just poof, go away after the debate. Why? Because we will be consumed with clips and sound bites from that final debate Thursday. So my challenge to you is get real. Get real with your friends, with your family, with those sensible-minded Democrats you might still know. Hell, get real with strangers. Beg them to keep this story in the headlines. Take Joey to task. Don't let this one cycle out. We must demand answers and the truth from Joe Biden. And that's going to do it for our show tonight. We thank you so much for tuning in to Real America. If you'd like to reach out to me, send a message on social media, via email, whichever. There it is. I like the compliments, praises, but I'll take the critiques and the harsh words as well. We'll see you same time tomorrow. Abbreviated version, though, before the debate. We just get 40 minutes tomorrow because then our pre-coverage will begin. But we'll see you at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Until then, though, folks, be proud, be safe. God bless.